The FujiCast is an independent Loading Zone production.
Saturday, 30th of May.
The FujiCast.
Welcome to the FujiCast. Every single time I do that, Kev. Well, welcome to... I feel like I want to go into the Frankie Goes to the Hollywood Welcome to the Pleasure Dome thing. Do you remember that song? Or are you too young?
Vaguely.
Oh, that reminds me of my DJing days, Kev. In my divorce, separated and singles club that I worked at in Waltham Abbey, just next door to the dog track. It was a proper dive, it was. That's where I met, there's memories. I met somebody called Scarface that was one of the bouncers there. And he gave me a cardboard box one day with a load of pictures and letters and stuff like that. And I said, he said, take it home, have a good read, son. I took it home. My mum and dad went white when they read who the letters were written by in a notorious prison cell in London. Well, I'm not sure if I should say. I'll tell you off air, because people still to this day are concerned by these people, even though they're not here anymore.
Did you give them back?
God, yeah. My dad literally drove me to Scarface's place and gave him the cardboard box back. I tell you what, there was history in that box.
It was Roger and Rennie, weren't it? Rennie.
Rennie?
Roger and Rennie.
I don't recall them as being the East End's most notorious crew at all. But I mean, anyway, welcome to the FujiCast. We've got another couple of days. Well, it's this and tomorrow, and then that's it for the daily. Unless you believe there'll be a second bounce with this whole thing, and then we'll be back on it again.
Oh no! Everybody stay in. Don't make it come back.
It's in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. Hello, welcome back to the FujiCast Daily.
Yes.
Used to be weekly, has gone quickly back to daily.
Oh no! I really hope that doesn't happen. I don't think it will. I think people are sensible.
Yeah, for all sorts of reasons we don't want it to happen. We'd rather like to go back to work. Although you were a little bit concerned about the rules, and rightly so, confused about the rules of how this track and trace will work, if it will.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows how long that will be in place for? But yeah, I mean, imagine getting a call on a Friday afternoon, because it's anonymous too, you see, so they don't have to tell you who it was you were in contact with, who's got it. So it could be a Friday afternoon prepping to go to a wedding, and then you get the call from the NHS and say, hello, Mr. Mullins, you've been, we're notifying you that you've been in touch with somebody who's got the virus, and you now have to stay in your house for 14 days. What happens then?
I know. Well, can you imagine, actually take that one step forward or backwards? I don't know how that works. But what if you're the bride or the groom and the NHS called you the day before? Excuse me, Mrs. Smith, I'm afraid you can't do your wedding tomorrow. You've got to stay in.
Yeah, there's all kinds of implications, isn't there?
Plumbers. I think earlier on, plumbers and pilots and electricians and all those, you're working for an airline that's got a very limited crew now. You've got 200 people that are going to be sat behind you in your Dreamliner, and you get the call, I'm ever so sorry, Captain Mullins. No flying for you tomorrow. Or anybody else that wanted to go to Cyprus.
I disagree with you a little bit there, because I don't think, a pilot, in fairness, I think there will be other pilots, or they can just postpone a flight or delay it or something. If you're a wedding photographer and you suddenly get told you can't go the next day, that's different.
Maybe I chose the wrong example.
You also said things like, a surgeon, a specialist surgeon or something like that, and, they've got a heart transplant going on or something, and that little box is beaten. They need to get that in, don't they? So yeah, there are all kinds of
transplant surgeons of various different organ transplants. They're not 10 a penny. It's not like could you do a couple of tonsils this afternoon, Dr. Mullins?
There are lots of situations where it's going to be an issue for sure.
Yeah. So I am as confused as you, but I am also thinking that it's not tenable for very long, because it could be, I don't know. I don't know how you can live your life thinking, am I going out tomorrow? At least this way, I know what's going on.
Yeah, but they can't. They're not gonna just say, yeah, you're right. It doesn't. It's too difficult for people. So go on, just do what you want.
I know, and I know what I'm suggesting is sort of untenable in itself as well. Oh God, how to unpick all this. God, who'd want to be a politician right now, Kev? Should we just go with some photo questions instead?
Yeah,
it's much easier living. Much easier pastime. Henry Warren. Bit of a subjective one. How important is a website for a photographer? I've been toying with the idea of setting one up during this lockdown, but currently, as I'm only a hobbyist with aspiration, you're never only anything, Henry. If you're a photographer, you're a photographer. With aspirations, he says. How beneficial would the expense and time be in setting one up?
I would say that if it's not something you need to make money from, or you're not really doing anything for promotional purposes, I would just stick to Instagram.
Would you? That was precisely the opposite of what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say, have some fun. I don't see the point if it's not for to advertise yourself in some way, and it may well be that you want to show your pictures off with nice big pictures and everything, and that's fine. But I'd still, even then, probably go to something like 500px or one of the other galleries, online galleries that don't kind of take the rights off you, of which there are some still, just about. But Instagram or something like that for me that makes more sense. If you're obviously trying to sell something, or you want to promote it or sell prints or whatever, then a website is, I'd say it's still quite important. Okay. Adam Brennan had another website one, and these are quite sort of light website questions, not too technical. First of all, big thank you for the Daily Show and amazing work on the podcast. That's very kind of you, Adam. I wanted to say in person before at the FujiCast event at the House of Photography. Adam, those days seem so long ago. Do you remember that, Kev? When we were allowed to stand next to each other in a bar.
It feels like decades and decades ago.
It does. It's weird, isn't it? Anyway, I planned to attend, but my long-distance partner had flown over that week. Oh, so you didn't come. So we planned time together after 6 months apart. I think that was probably a good idea, knowing what actually then unfolded. My question is, as an amateur photographer looking to move into pro work on the side when things clear up, how do you gear your website best for engagement and to get noticed? Is a portfolio enough, or do regularly updated blogs and events and podcasts and other features help a lot? I'll answer the podcast one in a moment, but what do you think about portfolios and updated blogs?
Well, your website is like the telephone on your table, okay? It's all well and good having a telephone on your table, but if nobody knows your telephone number, nobody's going to ring it. And to that end, you need to, the most important thing about having any kind of online business is the marketing outside of the website. So the social media, sharing, yes, blogs and stuff will be good for Google juice, but, you need to be pointing people to the website in different ways. So, that's the power of the viral reach, essentially. That's why things like Instagram are so good, because you can really drive traffic to your website, where you can then show off a little bit, more creatively. But ultimately, you can have the best website in the world, but if nobody is seeing it or sharing it or being directed to it, ain't going to make any difference.
Now, recently we talked about blogs, and you suggested that you felt blogs were not as important as they used to be, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What? But you've still. I mean, I know that you're working a lot on your website at the moment. Does that mean we won't see a Mullins blog?
No, absolutely. I think blogs are still important to have, because when people come to your website, they want to travel through all of the images and the recent weddings and stuff. They just are not as important, I think, in terms of the way that people consume content these days. So lots more people are doing curated content. So they're reading things like, Reddit or Instagram or Facebook or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But they're not consuming podcasts and audio, all kinds of stuff like that. They're not. People aren't driven by the same laborious text and pictures and stuff as they used to be. You still need to have them. I believe that. But they're not as powerful in terms of the marketing as they once were. That's my personal opinion.
Now, Adam did ask about podcasts and whether that helps as well. I'm not quite sure, Adam, whether you mean you want to start running a podcast or whether you're going to, because you can share other podcasts, of course. I'm not quite sure why you would want to do the latter. If it's the former and you want a podcast, I do know quite a few photographers now that are setting them up that are not necessarily doing it because they think they're going to get large audiences, but they're doing it because they want to communicate with a voice to their their clients. And as the net is becoming cleverer and cleverer, and now spider crawling speech as well as everything else, then there is an argument, Kev, isn't there, to say as speech becomes yet more and more relevant, that it's a good thing to have.
No, absolutely, and I totally agree. I've actually been thinking long and hard about different things for my website over this time, as I'm going through the process of hurling my head at this brick wall constantly, repeatedly, every single day. And it's definitely a thing to keep an eye on, definitely. But the thing is, it's the problem with Google ultimately is that it controls most things that people can see generally. Okay, and that's not an exclusive thing, but generally people refer to Google and stuff. And Google they don't change the goalposts because they just want to piss us all off. They change the goalposts because they try different experiments, and if it doesn't work, they just drop it. We all remember, there was 18 months or so where everybody scrabbled to get all of the authorship done on their websites, and so we could all have our little faces next to our published content in Google and stuff. Then one day they just switched it off. And we spent 18 months or so trying to deal with that, and they're just as likely to do that with anything else. That if it doesn't make Google enough money, they will eventually just go no.
Although, having said that, for my own interest with podcasting, etc., I think it's undeniably exciting that they're beginning to spend a lot more time behind their Google Podcasts app and stuff like that. You could look at sound.
I think that's one of the things that is unlikely to be thrown onto the fire of field.
I hope not for both of us, Kev. SoundCloud is one thing you could look at. Adam, get yourself a SoundCloud account and then start to make some recordings or whatever you plan to do audio-wise. And then you can embed them within your blog post, which might be fun. Christian Miles, just a quick last one, then we're into the interview. Second-hand lenses. I have my eye on a 56mm, but I'm wondering what to look for when I receive it. Well, it might be too late. The horse might have bolted by the time you receive it. I'm assuming you mean that you're going to buy it through a reputable second-hand dealer or something. Well, I buy second-hand lenses quite happily. But as for looking for stuff, what would you look for, Kev, when you receive it? I suppose you can look for dust within the chamber,
I think dust is less of an issue, but certainly things like mold, that kind of stuff indicates that the sealing on the glass is gone. Little kind of bits of mold, or certainly like large scratches and dust less so, because typically you're gonna get that's not going to show up, but it might do if it's if it's a big block. If there's dust on the inside, if there's anything on the inside of the element, anything at all, then there's the sealing is weakened somewhere. You said you'd buy secondhand lenses. I typically wouldn't. I would buy from a refurb store, or I'd buy off a friend. I wouldn't probably go to eBay and buy a secondhand lens, I must say. Personally, that's me. I would rather I'd rather go to a refurb store, or go to a lot of the camera stores, like Cambrai and Cameras up in North Wales. They've got a huge second-hand section where you can just go and look at it. And if it's a reputable store, like you just mentioned, they'll have an online second-hand section, and they will not sell stuff that's not good, Well, external damage, but not internal.
Well, MPB's a good example of that, and I think that's somebody I've bought secondhand through before in the UK in any way.
Right, all of them. Yeah.
So this week's interview, and it's another Mullins special. Bert Stephani. What is it about Bert? Because he has a really good following. I know that you're a big fan of his work, and of course he's in the Karga Collective as well, isn't he? Well, what is it about Bert Stephani's work that you particularly like?
Well, Bert was one of the first that I met in the kind of fujifilm ecosystem, if you like, and he used to shoot weddings. So he doesn't shoot them anymore, certainly not many, and his candid work was beautiful. I really like that, but really that's not what he's known for. It's his models and portraits, and certainly his kind of off-camera flash stuff. And it's amazing. He's a really, really, really good photographer. But actually, he's a really, really nice guy. He's huge. He's about 300 feet tall. And, he's got a heart of gold as well. I remember once we were in Tokyo many, many years ago. Well, not that many years ago, but several years ago. And this is a really embarrassing story. I wish I hadn't started it now. But we
You got to go through with it now, I'm afraid.
We got into this loo in a restaurant, quite a posh restaurant we were in, and it was one of those Japanese restaurants where you just kind of duck under a sheet that's hanging over the doorway, and you kind of go into the loo area.
Right.
And he's about to go in the urinal, and so am I, or so I think. And he whispers to me, there's a gentleman behind us, in very Japanese ways, just kind of waiting very calmly, looking in the opposite direction. And Bert's whispering to me, "It's a sink." And I didn't know what he was on about. I thought he was talking Dutch or something. And I was like, well, so I just carried on. And he went, "You're sitting in a sink."
Oh, Kev! As soon as he said sink, I thought, "Tell me, Mullage, you're not doing what I think you're doing." And you,
I looked down, and I was, and it was at exactly the same level as the urinal, and it was exactly the same shape, but it had taps, and it was a sink, and I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh dear! Have they ever? Was that the last time you went to Japan? Have they now marked your card? We're not letting that crass Welshman back in our country again.
Oh my god! But he saved me because it's a terrible conversation. But you could kind of stop and start again, and I was like, "Oh my god!" Okay. And then we went outside, and they gave us. It was the only thing. The good thing about Bert was that he, being from Belgium, he likes chips and waffles and stuff like that. So they gave us raw sea urchin.
Raw sea urchin.
Yeah, which I ate everything I could eat in Japan. I ate, but the raw sea urchin I tried, and that was not good. No. But I managed to deal with it in a little bit more of an elegant fashion than Bert did.
What did he do? Dribble it all down his top or something?
Well, let's just say he spoke some Dutch, or Belgian, or Flemish, or whatever he speaks. French, German. He speaks about 17 languages.
He didn't sound too happy, though, by the sound of it.
Well, no, he's a great guy. Really good guy, yeah. Member of the Karga Collective.
Well, he's not very good at eating a raw sea urchin, but he is a darn good photographer, as you're about to find out.
Bert Stephani, welcome to the Fuji Cast. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well considering the weird times we are in, and I'm very honored to be finally on the only podcast I really listen to, so it's great to be here.
So in terms of the we have to ask these questions these days, COVID, coronavirus, whatever you want to call it. What's been happening in your world in Belgium? Obviously, it's a little bit different, not too different geography-wise from us, but I think the rules and regs have been a little bit different.
Yeah, we started a bit earlier, luckily so, I guess. So we've had this situation for 2 months and a half now, something like that. And in the last 2-3 weeks, things are slowly starting to ease off. We are not allowed to visit friends or family yet. They do this thing in bubbles here where you're supposed to stay within your own family and things like that, which in practical ways, it's sometimes very hard to do, definitely in our situation with co-parenting and everything, but we figure it out. And now the shops are open. It's still a bit weird because it's face masks and social distance, and you cannot fit any clothes and things like that. And work is slowly starting to, photography at least, is possible since last week, I think, depending on the situation.
A lot of our listeners are wedding photographers. What about weddings over there? Are they going ahead or?
They are going ahead, but you can only have 30 people. So I think most will be cancelled anyway until, they can have the big party. I think weddings, like the official part, will still happening. But there's probably not much wedding photography going on, but it's not something that I do very often. So I'm not completely aware of the situation in that sector of the business.
You'd kind of taken a little bit of a backward step, if that's the right words to use, from photography anyway. Had you kind of thought, actually, I need to batten down the hatches and get some decent income in?
Yeah, well, actually, I signed my contract. So I'm doing a full-time job in marketing now. I signed my contract on the first day of the lockdown. So I was the last one in the building for a long time. It's something that has been growing for a while, and so it's not only Corona related. It starts back like last year, beginning of last year. I had the opportunity to work for 8 months and to do videos basically, but as an employee. And I figured I should take that because the business was not looking too well at the moment. I think, well, it's pretty much everywhere the same. And then last year in October, that job was finished. And so I tried to go back to full-time photography. But on one side, I felt I wasn't ready for it yet, because I also took that as a kind of a sabbatical to think about what is it that I'm going to do. The marketplace has changed. I have changed. My needs have changed. So I started to go back right away, but I felt like I was not ready yet to, start to take a complete new start actually. So then I slowly started to look around again for a temporary job. And that's what I started doing in like half of March. I took up a job in marketing. It's just until the end of the year, so it's a temporary job too. I really don't want to take up a long-term job in a way. I want to get back to photography at some point, but I'm in no rush basically, because I feel like I have to figure out first what direction I want to go in, where can I fit into this industry. So it's a lot of things. It definitely an economical part of paying the bills, which for me became harder and harder every year. And then on the other side, I was also doing a lot of work that I didn't like doing. So what's the point in just barely getting by if you're not doing things that you like doing? When I just started photography, I was happy with anything I could do with the camera, but I think over the years you kind of change too, and I felt like I was doing everything and anything that came my way that was a paid job. I did it because I had to do it, just to make ends meet and to feed my kids and everything. It was nothing like really dramatical, but it also was not a comfortable situation. So, and there was no space at that point to think about which direction I wanted to go. I just had to do whatever that came my way. And so I really needed that break a little bit, I think. And now, of course, with COVID-19, I had another reason to look for some safety. So it's basically a lot of things together, but it's not just the virus thing that let me do this step. And is it a step backwards? I don't know. I think in a way it's a step forward. In the beginning, it felt a bit like a step backward. I thought about it long and hard, and I waited a long time to do it because it felt like a step backwards. But once I did it, it feels like a step forward instead.
What you've done is brave and sensible, and it will allow you to grow as a photographer, given the right opportunity and the right time when that comes back around.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's always going to be in waves and everything, but I've come to this point in my career that I really want to rethink what I'm doing, and also the business is forcing us, because you have this, I call it the hobbyification of photography. And that was first seen before we even started in the documentary editorial market. Basically, that's a hobby right now. There's very little people who make a living out of that. Mm-hmm. And I think you see the same in a lot of other parts of the business. And it has to do with technology. It has to do with the fact that images are consumed at a rapid pace, so nobody takes the time to look at images right now, or at least not at the same kind of images that professional photographers used to make. And it is quite impressive what technology can do these days. So I feel like there's still there will always be a place for professional photographers, but it will be a different one than when I started 17, 18 years ago.
one of the things that I often say to people is that cameras have become so good but so cheap at the same time that this term, and you just mentioned hobbyfication, that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of that. But you're right, there will always be a place for photography and good photography, and hobbyists aren't necessarily a bad thing. It just allows everything to flow in different directions.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can try to fight that, but you can only maybe delay it a little bit, but it will happen. If you see, I was just a couple of months ago, I did an event. I shot an event, and there was this table of people, and they asked me to take a picture of them. So I took a picture with my nice, expensive camera, and then one of them said, "Can you also take a quick picture with my iPhone?" And I took that picture, and that looked way better than anything that was on the screen of my expensive camera, because it's just all this automatic stuff. And if it's going to be consumed on a small phone screen, I would have spent 5 minutes on editing that image, and that image on the phone was better right away. So I'm sure I could still make a better one out of the one that came out of my camera. But I was absolutely surprised at because that was low light, bad light, mixed light, but all that artificial intelligence in the phones these days, they solve that for you.
It's good that people are being exposed to photography, and we had Martin Parr on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said that you have to look at bad photos to understand or to appreciate good photos. So
maybe.
It's got a place, I suppose, in that respect. One of the things that I remember you doing around about that time, perhaps, maybe a little bit earlier, was the work in the refugee camps. So what was the story behind that? How did you get involved? And I suppose more importantly, what happened with the pictures? Do you think those pictures made a difference of any sorts, or how did they kind of get out into the open, if they did?
The big frustration is that I just don't have enough time to do things like that, because I feel like it's important. It's like I'm living like 150 kilometers away from that space, so that's not far, and nobody knows about it. It's never in the press, so it doesn't exist if it's not in the press. And it was through some common people we knew that I found out about it, and I was like, can I do something? Can I just go there? And I didn't really go with a plan apart from the fact, like, I want to do some portraits of these people. I want to hear their stories. And so the first time I went there, I took an Instax printer with me, and I gave them portraits of themselves. And it was so amazing how grateful they were for these little low-quality prints. But they really, really, it opened up the doors to start conversations and everything with those people. And I have no ambition to be like a social documentary photographer, but I feel like if you know a good story, if you know how to take a picture, then you also have a certain obligation to use that. Even though you can only do it a couple of days a year, then you can still make some kind of difference. And it's not like my images made the press or anything, but I know that some of my friends saw them. And they didn't know about it. And we are in this climate. It started a couple of years ago, actually, that I went there and took some pictures. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago. The thing is that the difference is small that you make. But after those first pictures, I had lots of people who brought me clothes and tents and sleeping bags they didn't use. And I went back and I took them. And, that tent, it doesn't stop the refugee crisis, but it gives a family a roof over their head for the night. So even though the impact may be small, it can still be big for some of those people. And also just the fact that you are there as a human being, not as a policeman or something like that, and they can just talk to you. For them, it's important. For me, it's important to understand who they are, understand that they are just, they just had the bad luck to be born in another place, but otherwise they're pretty much like myself or anybody else that I know. So it was an eye opener. I also took my son once, and I
How old
think it's
was he
just
at the time? How old was he?
I think it was 14 or 15 at the time.
Mhm.
And it made an impact on him, and not a bad one, because he played with the kids over there and everything. He played with the small children. But he's also now someone that, it's very easily said these days. People say the most racist things without meaning them. I have friends that, and I really still call them friends, although if I look what they put on Facebook, they shouldn't be my friends, because they're just, it's fear, and racism comes out of fear most of the time, and it's all the fault of the refugees and things like that. But I know they're not like that. But those pictures, and I'm publishing these pictures on my website and social media, it got my friends to talk to me about it. And I've been there. I talked to those people, so I can tell their story to my friends, and hopefully some of these friends will think twice the next time they want to blame refugees for everything that goes wrong in the world. So I'm not going to solve the refugee problem with any of those pictures, but if some people start seeing them as people, then even if it's just one person, then it's a success, in my opinion. And things have changed, because I've been there last summer twice. And now they're afraid of images, because they have bad experiences with images. Police that takes images, and then they get deported or something based on pictures. So it's a lot harder to work there as a photographer or video maker. But still, they allow you to do it if they see that you mean it. Because the last time we were there, I actually took a guy to the hospital that fell off one of the. He tried to jump on a truck to go to the UK, and fell off. And there's nobody there who's going to help them. They cannot get to the hospital themselves. And so we took him to the hospital and spent half a day in the hospital. But you just know that the hospital staff is going to treat them a lot better if you are with them as a witness. And I had tea with these people, and they invite you and share the little bit of food they have. It's amazing that they still allow interaction, actually, after all they've been through. But it's very sobering to hear their stories.
And the good thing about people like you is that you have this kind of understanding of the fact that photography is generally your income, but also the workshops and all that kind of stuff is also part of the income. But there's a social element that comes with it. And I remember, I'm fairly sure it was last year, but it may have been the year before, where you started the 50 with 50 idea.
Yeah.
And that was 50 pictures in 50 days with just the 50mm lens, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I never got involved in it because that was just terrifying. But I know lots of people that did, and I still occasionally stumble across blog posts and pictures on Facebook where it's hashtag 50 with 50 or hashtag Bert Stephani or whatever. So that's incredible. How did that take off, and did you get any feedback from it?
Well, I first did it 10 years ago, over 10 years ago, and that was at that point it was more a technical exercise, and I'm forcing myself to use that one lens, and I found it very interesting, and I still made some of my favorite family pictures from my kids during that first time. And last year, I think it was the 1st of September, I just a couple of weeks before, somewhere in August, I was reminded to the fact that it was almost 10 years ago that I did that for the first time. And I was like, I'm going to try to do it again. And the 50 or the 35 in APS-C and Fuji speak has always been my favorite focal length since that first 50-50 project 10 years ago. And I figured, like, let's do it again, because it was also a time where I really wanted to go back to basics and see who I am and what I want to do as a photographer. And this time it was way less technical, because I was very, very comfortable with just using that one lens. Although I also shot a bit with the GFX and the 50R with the 50 millimeter lens, and I think even some with the X100, something like that. But I'm very comfortable shooting with just that one standard lens. And this time it was more about storytelling, and also I just started. I posted on my Instagram one picture a day. And I hashtagged it 50/50 Project 10 because it was a 10-year anniversary. And a lot of people joined me or joined later, and there's still people joining. And it's really nice to see how other people are doing it. But to me, it was a bit, by sharing it, it was also a bit my, I feel like a lot of people, when they get stuck, they buy new gear. And I feel like well, you can do so much with just that single lens if you are willing to explore it and push yourself through the wall. Because at a certain point, you have done it all, or you feel like you have done it all. And if you push through, then you will learn new things. I believe, and that was for me. It happened in the first time I did that 50/50 project, and it happened in the second installment of it, but in a different way. And so I think it's a very good exercise for people who want to take their photography seriously to just try it out. And sometimes it's frustrating, but it's also a lot of fun. And right now I'm still like, I don't have enough distance from it yet. But I printed just on the simple home printer a lot of small prints of my favorite images, and I'm trying to lay them out and turn them into some kind of zine. I just figured out that you don't like the word zine, but
I hate the word zine.
I can understand. Well, it's just like a little book or something. I heard that in one of the previous podcasts, I believe. Yeah, I want to do something with it because I also kept a diary for those 50 days. And so I want to see if I can find, I don't want to do a chronological thing, but I want to see if I can find some common themes and combine some of my writings with the pictures. But it takes time.
And of course, you and I are both members of the Karga Collective, and Neil also has been invited. And I feel when I look at things that I do for the Karga Collective, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but I feel like the pictures or the projects or the stories that I put there are maybe a touch more personal than the stuff I put elsewhere. And I think, and I'm not sure really why, but I think that's because it's, you have a target. It's Patrick says, right, Kev, you've got to do your story on the 24th of May. And that gives me something to aim for. And I suppose that's the same with the 50. When you encapsulate something in within a timeline, you know it's going to end. You know it's going to be done. Yeah. You know it's going to end. Rather than I'm going to take a picture every day of the week or every week of the year for the next 5 years or something. That's too fluffy.
But I think if you do a personal project, which is something that I advise every photographer to do, start with something that is not too big. Start with a 1 week project, and a lot of the stories we do on the collective are 1 day projects or 2 hour projects, whatever. But you can do that too. And I think 3 years ago, Patrick and I did a Kage workshop in Belgium, in Brussels, and we basically made it like a temporary collective and had them shoot a story in a day. And you can do that too. Just look at whatever topic we are doing on our collective and try to do that too. Give yourself 1 or 2 weeks to do it. And the thing is not to aim for perfection. Like sometimes you get a good story, sometimes it doesn't work out, but that's not a problem. It's part of learning. So just try it and finish that project, and whatever comes out of it. But if it doesn't work out, then it's fine. For every successful personal project, there's probably millions that didn't work out. So
okay, a couple of quick fire questions before we end.
Yep.
Okay, quick answers. Best commission you've ever done?
Doing the Wild project for Fujifilm a couple of years ago, shooting with the GF 250 lens and I shot people who are connected to nature, hunters, fishers, sheep herder, whatever. I really enjoyed that project a lot, although the lens is actually pretty long for my kind of use.
Yeah, I remember those pictures. They were ace. Okay, what's missing in your life right now? Doesn't have to be tech. It could be anything.
The ability to go out and travel and see people, hug people.
Okay, photographic hero, 2 of them.
Kevin Mullins, Neil James.
Kevin and Neil.
I don't have any real photographic heroes. I like a lot of photographers' pictures, but I try to like pictures instead of photographers.
Good answer. I remember on a little side note from that, when I first met you back in, I don't know, 2011, 2012, I just got off an aeroplane I shot a wedding in Italy. I threw myself on an aeroplane to Tokyo, and literally the first thing I had to do was walk on stage in front of you, David Hobby, and Zach Arias, all sat there, and it was the most terrifying experience of my entire life.
I remember thinking, oh, George Michael just got on the stage.
George Michael. What would you say to a 17-year-old Bert? There's a lot of 17-year-old Berts out there at the moment. They want to get into photography. They want to build a business. What's your advice? What would you have told yourself at 17?
At 17, just enjoy life. Take a camera wherever you go. Start to do a project. Do a book, something like that. It's very hard for me to say because I have a 17-year-old son, but I would probably advise not to go to school for photography or anything, but just start something. Just finish high school and just do something, make stuff. Doesn't matter if it's good or if it's bad, you're going to learn. Try to follow along, help out other photographers that you admire. Try to call them up and see, do they need an assistant to carry their bags, whatever. I think it's just do it a lot and do the things that you like doing and try to discover the things that you like doing. And I think at 17 it's also important to discover who you are as a person, because that will have an impact on who you will be as a photographer.
Thanks, Kev, and thanks, of course, to Bert Stephani. You two chatting together, the Mullins and the Stephani. And I'll never be able to think about you and a Japanese Lou in quite the same way ever again. Not that I did anyway, Kev. It wasn't something I thought an awful lot about. Right, back tomorrow for the final daily, and then it's back to Mondays from the 8th. We have a little plan up our sleeve. Say no more.
Do we?
Yes, Kev. See you tomorrow.
The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Goodbye, sweetheart. Well, it's time to go. We're back tomorrow with another show. Well, unless we're fired, we'll talk to you then. Goodbye, sweetheart. Goodbye. Goodbye.